It's been our setup day for this, more or less, and we have a guest who's going to be joining us, Lake Speed from Total Seal Piston Rings, and he's going to let us know about some information and stuff, and we got some good Q&A that we have planned for that. So we're going to be doing that via Zoom, and guys, do you think it's going to work or what? Yeah? Okay, well, let's see if we can bring him in. Lake, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Right here.
All right. Well, something's working today. Okay, let me tell the viewers out there kind of a little bit of what we got. So this is one of the pistons that we had custom made. Jay made these pistons for us. Jay Pistons made these. Pretty much all the bells and whistles they can throw into a piston. But the funny thing about that is we actually picked our ring set before we picked our piston set. And not too many people know, but that's pretty much the best way to do it.
Oh yes, it's once you've spec'd out the ring, then it's way easier to remove metal from the piston to make sure the rings fit. It's a lot harder to add material to a piston once you've already cut it, or add material to a ring. So if you have the ring and you've chosen that ring based on the needs of the application, because essentially all a piston ring is a seal. Some people think, oh, a ring's got to be really strong and all these things. No. It's not a load-bearing structural member of the piston. No different than a gasket isn't what's carrying the load of the cylinder head. It's there to fill that void, to seal properly. So having the correct seal is what the goal is. Once you've defined what that needs to be for the application, obviously the more boost that you put in the engine, now there is more load. So that ring material, the thickness of the ring, does need to be factored in to some degree. You can't be as super thin, because now you could have too much load and it could damage the ring. So the ring's got to be fit for the application. Then you can build the piston around that ring to make sure you get the correct fit and fitment. Because again, you want good ring seal. If you got a really sloppy fit, just because the ring will go into the ring groove doesn't mean that it's a good tight fit, which is going to hold the ring correctly so you get good ring seal.
Now, and to improve that ring seal, you guys are doing something that is typically done on the piston. Now, in the past, one of the modifications made to pistons a lot of time for high performance use would be to actually put little grooves in here that would be, or little ports as they call them, horizontal or vertical gas ports into the piston that would let some of that combustion pressure make sure that ring stays seated. But you guys came up with a pretty neat way of doing it in the ring itself by actually making gas ported piston rings. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so obviously gas porting the piston isn't a new concept. It's been around since at least the 70s, probably even earlier than that. We haven't seen examples of it. But the concept is pretty simple. Obviously, you've got a lot of combustion pressure going on above the piston. It's trying to blow by, so we call it blow by. It's trying to get by the piston rings into the crankcase. The tension of the ring itself isn't what seals the piston ring against the cylinder wall. It's the gas pressure that gets behind the ring and pushes it out. So the idea of gas ports is kind of like piston ring jiu-jitsu. As opposed to trying to fight that force with just static tension, you're using that force to work for you. The idea of a gas-ported piston, or the downside to say of the gas-ported piston, is that those ports are static. They don't move in terms of around the board. They're always located in the same spot, so the gas pressure is always being located on the same spot of the cylinder wall. Other downside is the gas port being in the piston means it's typically going to be made out of aluminum. Well, me being the tribologist oil guy that I am, happen to know that detergents and motor oil designed to keep things clean doesn't work on aluminum. They work on steel, but they don't work on aluminum. So what happens is over time, those gas ports get clogged up due to carbon buildup. So now it can't be as effective at moving that gas pressure to help ring seal, but then it's also always pushing that same spot. So your nice round cylinder bore turns into a stop sign over time because it's not able to redistribute that gas pressure. So by going to a gas ported piston, you actually solve both of those problems. Now the ring material, one, is made out of steel, so it can be cleaned by the detergent additives. And then because the ring is always moving due to the crosshatch angle spinning the ring, now that gas pressure is always moving around, so your cylinder bore wear is more even and it stays cleaner longer, so you get all the benefits of gas porting and you kind of solve some of the drawbacks of gas porting. So yeah, it was really great idea had by some pretty smart guys several years ago that race at very high levels of competition globally. And it really works well, and now it's able to be shared with everybody else.
Well, the thing I like about it is, you know, there's two ways to skin the cat, and you could have the gas ports in the piston, which, you know, in some circumstances works pretty dang well. But the downside to that, most of the times, it's hard to find an off-the-shelf piston that has that benefit. With these, you can get a ring pack in most of the metric bore sizes that are out there that are pretty popular. That's going to work. If you've got a 1.0, 1.2, 2.8 ring package, you guys got a solution for that. That now I can have the benefits of gas porting by just upgrading the rings.
Exactly. That's one of the real nice benefits, besides just the performance benefit of gas porting, that having a ring now makes it possible for your shelf pistons, which are, you know, typically easier to get in terms of lead time. Sometimes they're more affordable as well. You can take that shelf ring or shelf piston. Now I can upgrade the performance of that ring or piston just by adding the gas ported ring, and you can upgrade your wrist pin, upgrade your rings. Now all of a sudden you've got a really nice package, because it takes all of those. You know, that's the wonderful thing about engines that I love, is that there's never a magic bullet. You know, there's no one recipe that covers every engine. There's always complexities. They always have their own little unique personalities and temperaments. And if you can take that shelf piston that fits your bore, that's got the right compression height and all those kind of things, and I can upgrade the ring package, I can upgrade the wrist pin, now I've got a really nice piece and get the job done and go have some fun.
And the nice thing about it, you know, with the gas porting, you get a few different advantages. You're getting the fact that now you've got a superior seal. You're probably making some more horsepower and torque from that. You are also getting an engine that's generally easier to breaks in quicker. And we saw over at the, was that Schaefer Racing Engines we were at? We also saw, that there's actually some other benefits. What are those?
Well, the blow-by, you said the better ring seal, that's huge, because, again, back to being an oil guy, the thing that kills your motor oil is blow-by. Think about it. The base oil that's in your motor oil is the same base oil that's in your transmission fluid. And I don't know many people that change their transmission fluid at the same time they change their motor oil. Why? There's no blow-by in the transmission. They're both hot. They both have things that are wearing. What's the difference? Combustion blow-by. That's what kills your motor oil. So the better you can seal the ring to the cylinder wall, the less blow-by there is. Now you get two benefits. One, your oil will work better, which means you have less wear in your engine. And two, your oil will live longer. So what we saw there at Shavers, you know, like you said, it broke in faster because you're utilizing that gas pressure to help push along that process of seating the ring to the cylinder wall. But then you saw less blow-by, considerably less blow-by. Yes. And then that means from a difference of from 3 to 10 CFM. So without gas ports, you're at 10 CFM. With gas ports, you're down at 3. And of course, what's the benefit of that? Better ring seal, less blow-by, means more horsepower, because as opposed to that pressure blowing by the piston and not being able to move the piston, now it's driving the piston, it's creating that torque, it's creating the horsepower to move the vehicle. So gas ports mean more horsepower, which we all love that, let's be honest. Who doesn't love horsepower?
There you go. And as far as getting the ring seal, another product we found out you guys made, and we haven't used it yet. You know, we've done a lot of stuff here, and as Lake was talking about, getting the correct cylinder finish, the honing procedure you use, that's all critical in making sure that you get a great break-in on the engine, you get great performance from the engine. Of course, things like having a gas-ported top ring makes it a little bit easier to break in the engine, and something else that can make it easier is this Total Seal Quick Seat. Tell us a little bit about the product. I see it's just, it looks like it's just kind of a powdered dry film lubricant.
Yeah, it is a powder-based dry film lubricant. And the key thing about why a dry film lubricant is unique and why it's really good for ring break-in really is more of a story about the deficiencies of a oil. So oils, and you remember maybe people who are DSPORT folks who have been watching us in the past, we've talked about that Strybeck curve, how oil is that film and you need that speed for oil to build that thick oil film. Well, during engine assembly, there is static pressure, and once you put the cylinder heads on, now you've got some cylinder pressure. Well, that ring is going up and down as you put the engine together, turning it over. Well, that ring is now in contact with those peaks. If you have oil or any kind of liquid lubricant on the ring or on the cylinder bore, you're not moving that fast enough to create that oil film to protect that part. So what can happen is with the static tension and that motion, you can get scuffing, scoring, you can get some, not say micro welding, but you can get some surface damage, abrasion, adhesion going on during that time. Well, that damage to the ring, to the cylinder bore surface finish, that can lead to more blow-by, that can reduce the life of the ring and the cylinder bore finish for that example. So the idea of a dry film lubricant is that now you have something that's going to prevent scuffing, scoring, and galling, and it doesn't require the same speed. So it can do it at basically room speed, room temperature, static, very low speeds. It can do all of those things, which a liquid lubricant can't do, a dry film lubricant can do. Then the other nice thing about Quick Seat is it is also a cleanliness indicator.
You know what it reminded me of, Blake? Let me stop you for a sec. When I read the instructions for using it, it reminded me, I think it was in grade school and stuff, when you'd brush your teeth as a kid and then they made you chew on the stuff to see how well you did and you saw all the spots you missed. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the indicator solution, exactly. So Quick Seat, when the cylinder bore is clean, completely free of any honey residue, other kind of grit or grime, all of which is not going to be helpful in the break-in process, it's black. I mean, the stuff is like a black gray powder. When you put it on, if it stays that color, your cylinder bore is dirty. Only when it turns the cylinder bore green is when it actually indicates that it's clean. So you basically can keep cleaning and applying the Quick Seat until your cylinder bore turns green. Once it has that green hue to it, you know it's clean. You can carry on with the assembly, and you know that you're going to get the proper lubrication, and it's going to do all the right things to help ensure a proper break-in. So you get the best ring seal, best oil life, best cylinder life, all the good things.
And we also mentioned earlier, you were talking about Piston Ring End Gap, and we've actually had this machine. We purchased it from you guys when we started the Club DSPORT machine shop, and we've been using it ever since to do all of our ring filing. Talk a little bit about why this is the way to go with this machine versus some of the other options out there. You know, you can buy that $35 manual grinder, which I used to have, unfortunately. Not here, but when I was in high school, and that's something you don't want to use. I mean, that thing almost rips apart the piston ring, but this thing, it always leaves a nice finish, and it just does a great job. What's different about this machine versus some of the other options out there?
So what's really nice about the power ring filer, and going back to what you said, with today's rings that are made out of stainless steel, gas nitrided rings, PVD coated rings, you don't want to to try to cut those manually. One, the materials are very difficult, so you're gonna have a hard time doing it. And number two is when you do have that PVD coated face, it's important that you don't want to damage that face at the end gap, because at those tips is one of the highest pressure points in the cylinder bore ring interface. The tip pressure is very high because there's a lot of gas pressure right there. So by having the power ring filer, where it lets you to hold the ring properly, locate it, and it's got a diamond cutting wheel, so it cuts it very smooth, very precisely. Now I can get a good clean cut on it. It's got the deburring wheel where you can deburr the edges to make sure that you don't have sharp points right there that could damage the cylinder wall. So that's what's really nice about that unit, is that it's precision cutting, does the job quickly and effectively, so you don't get tired, arms tired. Well, that's close enough. Nope, you get the right end gap set for every ring all the time, and then you can deburr it properly so you get the correct fit, correct surface finish, because it's super, super important to have the correct end gap. You can have a little bit extra ring gap, and pretty much you're the only person that knows. If you don't have enough ring gap, everybody's gonna know. Because if the ring butts, now it becomes like a disc brake, or say a drum brake, and it's gonna, that ring pressure is gonna go out and it's gonna lock up, and nothing good happens out of that.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And I noticed, we've noticed at least, with the OEs and the manufacturers, they've gone a little bit different than it used to be with the amount of gap you have on your top ring versus your second ring. What are you guys recommending as a piston ring company out there? Do we go the old school way where we keep a bigger top ring end gap because it's hotter and it's going to close up more? Or do we actually go with a bigger second ring end gap because it does a better job at keeping the pressure doing the right thing to keep the ring seated?
So one of the real tricks to this, and because this is a really common question, I'm glad you brought it up, Michael, because the real difference about why the wider second ring end gap really has nothing to do with the top ring. There's a theory, and we understand about, okay, if you've got to have this wider second gap so that you can relieve the gas pressure so it doesn't unseat the top ring. But as you mentioned, if you already have the same static gap on the top and the second, because the top ring's hotter, there will always be a wider second ring gap because of that. Because the top ring is going to get hotter, it's going to close up more, so there's always room to do that. And we've even seen a lot of people run a gapless second ring, and they don't unseat the top ring even at high RPM, which means it's even more difficult. Now, all of this is to say, the OEMs have been very clear, we want this. Many piston manufacturers have been very clear, we want this extra static gap in the second ring. And the question is why? And the answer is low tension oil rings. When you have a low tension oil ring, you're using that extra gas pressure to gas activate the oil ring to push that oil back through the oil drain back holes. That's the reason why you're doing it. And which is why on the old school way of doing it, when we had 3/16 high tension oil rings, there was so much oil ring tension, it didn't need any help. It already had plenty of scraping ability to get the job done. But today's low tension oil rings, we're using that gas pressure to help make it happen. Me and Dean Baker, the head engine builder at Joe Gibbs Racing Motocross, we've seen that on a 2-ring piston setup, where all you have is the top ring and an oil ring. You can open the end gap on the top ring and blow by goes down. It makes no sense until you consider that the fact is you still got that oil ring, and it's a little bitty 1.5 millimeter low tension oil ring. That little bit of extra ring end gap is allowing that gas pressure to get in there and gas activate the oil ring, which makes the oil ring more effective. It makes that whole ring package as a whole more effective, and that's the key.
And you mentioned a good point there. The fact that you make one change one place, for that action there's a reaction, and the fact that with the ring sets, you're not just selling them a gas ported top ring. You actually have a matched second ring and oil control ring that's made to work together in that package. And with those, I believe you've got them, let me see here, all the way from 81 millimeter up to 87.5 millimeter, most of the popular bore sizes in there.
And we added recently some 99, 100, and 101 millimeter sets as well. Sometimes those are going to be like maybe a 1, 1, 2, 2.5. There's some, obviously there's some Porsche, there's some other stuff out there too that's not just the traditional 1 millimeter, 1.2, 2.8. We've got some other variables in there in that same family. But yeah, from your 81 millimeter up to about 101 millimeter metric bore size stuff, we got a lot of coverage in that area now that we used to not have.
And we don't have any examples of it here, but you guys can actually do a lot of tricks to piston rings too. You've got a lot of different machining processes and things that you can do to actually change the tension in the ring, change the flatness of the ring, basically the whole accuracy and precision. Talk just quickly about some of those features.
Well, so you said, just because you've got this bore size and your groove height is, say, 1 millimeter, well, you can change that radial depth of the ring and take some tension out of that ring. So in some cases, we're making rings for high-end applications as thin as 80 thousandths thickness. So it's a 20 thou tall, 80 thou wide. So that's a pretty extreme example, but we can do that. Or you can make them as big as 2 millimeters and they're 185 thou deep. So depending upon the application, we can do that. And then with the diamond lapping process, we can hold tolerances to 5 millionths of an inch. So we can really get it super flat, get RA on the ring below 2 RA, which if you can get your ring groove flat enough, now you get an even tighter seal, not just between the cylinder wall face and the ring, but you can also get it between the ring and the ring groove itself. Because that's another place of possible leakage, is getting it really flat there, which when you do that, now you can tighten those clearances up even more. And a lot of that goes back to the higher the RPM of the engine. At super high RPMs, especially if you get into naturally aspirated, very high RPM engines, your cylinder pressures have dropped so much past peak torque. You have to have everything you got going for you to control that ring, to keep inertia from doing what it's doing, allow the gas ports to get in there, so you can run even tighter vertical clearance so the ring doesn't want to dance. And so there's all those little things, which that's kind of the fun part about being a Total Seal, is that because we've worked with crazy nitro fuel card engines, pro stock drag racing engines, Formula One, NASCAR, everything under the sun, we can begin with, like you said at the very beginning, we can start with the application, understand the needs of the application, and we've got this whole tool chest of different things we can do to the ring to make sure we've got the proper ring for your application, so you can get the best performance out of your engine. Because that's the biggest thing, is that what you're doing on the intake side to get that air fuel mixture into the combustion chamber, that's the ultimate power potential of the engine. My job, what we do after that, is how much of that actually makes it to the flywheel. Efficiency is our job, and that's what we're really good at, is trying to increase the efficiency of the engine, because there's lots of things you can do to make the engine more volumetric efficiency. But our job is to then give you the highest mechanical efficiency to make the most use of that power, because the piston ring is the #1 source of friction in the engine. So if you tackle that, then you've already you've taken out your biggest obstacle of making use of the power that you can generate.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Lake. Before you go, are there any questions? I haven't seen back. I think we covered it all for them. Do we have one? No? We're good? Okay. Well, Lake, thank you so much for joining us. You were our
It's
first.
kind of fun, you know. No SEMA this week is obviously weird for all of us. I'm not sure many people in our ministry have ever been home this week in November.
Yeah, I haven't been home for Halloween and I don't remember how long. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. My neighbors didn't know what to do, but it was almost a good thing there was COVID and they wouldn't come by this year because I wouldn't know what to do. But anyways, thank you so much for spending time with us. And right now, guys, if you're still following us out there, we're going to be rolling one of our videos. And this video is going to tell you a little bit about DSPORT, where we came from, who the import drag racing circuit is. And we made this a few years ago, so even since then we've been updating some stuff. But I don't want to give away too much, but here we go. This is DSPORT magazine in the IDRC.
Import Drag Racing Circuit, IDRC, is our drag racing series. But I say our drag racing series when actually it is our parent. IDRC is how DSPORT magazine was started. IDRC was started in 1998, and the reason why it was started was Battle of the Imports was about the only game in town, but they were really regional. They were just keeping it in Southern California. Nobody had taken the cars from the West Coast, brought them out to the East Coast, and produced an event. And that's why I got together with the other 12 guys that helped form IDRC. We put together the series, and for the first time we had some of the best cars from the West Coast come out to the East Coast to compete.
That's really how DSPORT has started. He turned IDRC into drag sport, and from drag sport it evolved into DSPORT magazine and DVD. So it's just basically a grassroots, no corporate frills type of drag racing event series that we do.
We have 6 classes. You can bring any car that you want and come out and get a taste of drag racing.
It allows us to interact and give back to the community that's buying the parts and reading our magazine and watching our DVD.
People bring their families out. People are rooting for their friends on the sidelines, and the people that are in the cars, they're happy because if you continue on to the next round and you have support and your friends are there watching you, it's just a good feeling round after round to keep making it.
We welcome all levels of drag racer, from the very beginner who just wants to go out and do some fun runs, do some shakedowns in their car, all the way to the Pro-Am vehicles that will be running single-digit quarter miles in, fully caged but technically streetable cars. IDRC is appealing in the sense that it is not intimidating to go to. You don't feel like, oh God, there's going to be a John Force out there that's going to look down on me. Everybody out there is having fun. It's a safe environment to drag race your vehicle, keep it off the street.
Another car powered by a HKS T51R SPL was DSPORT staff member Wen's R33. Now when I hear the pressure's on, tell us a bit of the background story of why there is so much pressure from the people in the office of why you need to perform today.
I think the main thing is, for some odd reason, people think I'm a show car versus a race car.
Regardless of high gas prices and electric vehicles and so forth.
Big technical difficulty of the day. That sounded horrible, didn't it? The volume just went off the chart, and it didn't do that in practice. So we're going to take a break here, see if we can get that sorted out, and hopefully we'll be back and you get to enjoy that video in just a few moments.